think one of the reasons that The Matrix and its sequels were so powerful was that it was actually addressing a bigger underlying anxiety that we were all feeling at the time that it came out. And it was angling towards addressing the ideas and problems that we were all feeling under the system of neoliberal capitalism. Certainly, I am not the first to say that The Matrix addresses capitalism, so I'm not exactly saying that I'm saying anything new here. But let me just express some of the ways that I think the original Matrix movies does address the idea of neoliberal capitalism. The Matrix was a film about a system in which we are all made to think of it as natural, normal, and just part of our everyday lives. We work for it every single day, and we are being used as batteries even when we're not at work, even when we're at home. Every aspect of our lives is made to devote to this system. Our labor, our life is seen as only being useful to those in power as a way to help keep that system running.
Because every single employee understands that they are part of a whole. Thus, if an employee has a problem, the company has a problem.
And we are told and made to feel that is the only way that it can be, even if we feel inside that that's not the case.
Either you choose to be at your desk on time from this day forth, or you choose to find yourself another job.
That ain't a choice.
Now, I think in a post-pandemic world where so many of us are starting to realize that once we strip away the few outlets of life that we have outside of work, we recognize how much of work is not an extension of desires in our life, but made to just feed a system that we don't feel much investment in or get much out of, but only done for those in power to keep making more money, to keep holding on to their power. A lot of us are doing jobs that we just don't feel are extensions of what we want to do with our life, but something that we are made to do, are forced to do, and just are making money for those in power. The energy of our labor gets hoarded by the few, and we are told that this is the way it's supposed to be. As Margaret Thatcher was famous for saying, there is no alternative. A phrase she liked to use to signify her claim that neoliberal market capitalism is the best, right, and only system that works, and that the debate is over on the matter. Not to mention, if you look at the color coding of the original Matrix movies, the Matrix was green. Yes, green for technology, but also green for money, greed. Now, there's also a ton of other things that we could talk about with the Matrix when it comes to a capitalist metaphor, but I hope that at least brings to light the basic idea of the film. And by the way, if you don't want to take my word for it, I'm not the only one that says the Matrix is a metaphor for capitalism.
The Matrix was born out of a lot of anger and a lot of rage, and it's rage at capitalism and corporatized structure and forms of oppression.
The entire point of the original Matrix movie was about recognizing this system, that it exists, and coming to recognize that not only is it not natural, but there are ways to push out of it, to break out of it, to resist it, to live life in a different way. And for many people who watched the original Matrix movie, it left us with an energy, a desire to rage against the machine, rage against the system, as it were. Yet what do you do with that energy in a system that feels so overwhelming? The original Matrix told us that we were all the one, but we had nowhere to go with it. And even so, when you recognize a system that you're living in, how do you react to it? How do you escape the Matrix? The entire point of the original Matrix trilogy was getting us to have this energy to fight back, to push back, to destroy the system. And yet, many of us didn't know how to do that. Many of us didn't know exactly what to do with that energy, that inspiration that the original movie gave us. And that is the true interrogation and question at the heart of Resurrections. By taking us outside of the original film trilogy itself and Resurrections itself, Resurrections asks us not only to reflect on the Matrix's nostalgic legacy, but also to ask, what is the film's legacy in light of what it was trying to say? As well as how larger culture has reacted to capitalism since The Matrix came out, and how we have continued to both perpetuate it, resist it, or actively support it in the years since The Matrix released, and where all of those things have pushed us to extremes. And everyone else started to question his sense of reality. You can think of these crazy new worlds, but you can't actually live in them, Neo. You can't actually survive in them. They're only in your head. These utopian visions of the future. These powers that you think you can have. That's where we see Neil Patrick Harris's character as his therapist come in, constantly questioning Neo's reality, and constantly questioning his idea of himself as someone who could see these other realities, and making him think that he is still stuck in this simple reality that he currently lives in within the Matrix.
You feel like you can talk about it? When we started working together, you had lost your capacity to discern reality from fiction. You came to me after trying to jump off a building. You said you wanted to fly away.
When we actually know, as we see later on in the films, that Neo actually was the one. He actually could do all of these things. He actually could fly. Man, it's Keanu damn Reeves. He is Neo. He is the one. Yet here he is now. He thought he was the one, but he didn't bring down the system. He just ended up hurting himself, and so is now questioning his entire sense of self as a result.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's what artists do. But it becomes a problem when fantasies endanger us or other people. We don't want anyone to get hurt, do we, Thomas?
He thought he could change the world, but maybe he didn't change anything. But there were some who played the Matrix games in this world and reacted to it that had a visceral reaction to it. And in our real world, the Matrix was a film series that many people loved and adored. Yet, it was also a film series that was clouded in metaphor, one that didn't make its metaphor entirely obvious and therefore missable. As I said, many people out there did not recognize that The Matrix was a series about capitalism. And so we also see this reflected in Resurrections as well. Jude is a co-worker of Neo at his gaming company, who constantly likes to reflect upon how the Matrix games made him see the world differently, and is justifiably a fan, no doubt, and understands the themes of technological anxiety of the works.
The first time I played the trilogy, I was shook. The paradox between free will and destiny. Are we all just algorithms doing what we're supposed to do, or can we escape our programming?
But he does not seem to have any larger recognition of the themes and ideas that could be read into the games. And this is a common dynamic with many films. And this isn't a judgment by me, but there are many films that are shrouded in metaphor, where the metaphor is often missed by the viewing audience just going in to see a fun movie. Let's talk about the end of the original Matrix trilogy. Many people said that Resurrections was a pointless film because the original trilogy definitively ended the story. But I never understood that reading, because at the end of the Matrix Revolutions, the war wasn't over. Sure, Zion was saved and the machines retreat, but the world is still in control by the machines. Neo was only able to stop the attack on Zion because he allied with the machines to stop Agent Smith, and he did that. But the machines were still out there, and humans were still forced to live in their small underground orgy city. The system wasn't defeated. It still existed, the Matrix still went on. And so it was frustrating to see so many read Revolutions as the ending, when it just was meant to be seen as a predictor of what was to come in real life. Again, let's continue to extend the capitalism metaphor out from the Matrix. If the machines represent the rich and powerful in control of the Matrix, aka the capitalist system, and the humans in the film represent all of us toiling away in the system for their benefit, what does Agent Smith represent within all of this? In many ways, Agent Smith is both enforcer and a victim of the Matrix itself. We first meet him as a government agent, working to quash any resistance to the Matrix.
As you can see, we've had our eye on you for some time now, Mr. Anderson. It seems that you've been living two lives.
But eventually, in his dogmatic pursuit of Neo, he comes to realize how much he also suffers within the Matrix.
You destroyed me, Mr. Anderson. Afterward, I knew the rules, I understood what I was supposed to do, but I didn't.
Forced to do a job that he despises, even though within that job he holds power. He holds certain privileges. And so, when he is pushed back and defeated by Neo, and then ultimately forgotten by the machines in power who he was fighting for, he recognizes how he was just a tool of the system, even as he was afforded benefits within it.
This zoo, this prison, this reality, whatever you want to call it, I can't stand it any longer.
In many ways, he was a darker reflection of Neo.
Then you're aware of it.
Of what?
Our connection.
Thinking that he was the one, and certainly had the power to be, and yet not able to recognize who his actual enemy was, who was actually causing him to suffer. Because the system told him that he was superior.
Human beings define their reality through misery and suffering. So the perfect world was a dream that your primitive cerebrum kept trying to wake up from.
But then became angry at the system that once benefited him because it viewed him as replaceable because, well, he wasn't one of the rich machines. He was only a program made to enforce the system's will, because they see them as the most immediate threats to their current status, instead of allies in the same fight against the same people harming us all.
These privileged folks might be analogous to the programs living within the Matrix, who are able to have high-paying jobs or getting to run the new Matrix, as we later learn the analyst is in Resurrections. Programs are people who have more power than humans within this system, but still aren't considered as worthwhile as the rich and powerful machines in charge of the entire system, or the suits, as the analyst refers to them as in Resurrections.
The suits tried. Obviously, without control of your source code, I knew that was impossible.
Agent Smith, however, is somewhat slightly different, because when we first meet him, he is actually an enforcer of the system, of the state. He actually has slightly more power to enforce and enact violence within the Matrix. While he's coded as an FBI agent, a direct agent of the system, he also takes over the role of police officer throughout the film too. In real life, police are often tools in enforcing state power, not there to protect citizens, but to protect property and capital, to protect the system, like Agent Smith is for the Matrix. There is also, as we have started to become more aware in popular consciousness over the past few years and decades, a huge issue with white-leaning bias and even outright white supremacist teachings in policing. How police are often told to over-police black communities, are often more likely to react with violence when they encounter black people, and more. Yet while police are often in hold of power and privilege over others, they often come from lower class communities, and are often seen as just as disposable by those in power, even those who would use them to enact their power. Again, similar to how Agent Smith slowly morphs into a metaphor for a growing fascist movement within the Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions.
So those who fall into fascist movements are often both, again, victim and enforcer, and a danger to both. Agent Smith was wielded by the system, but his growing wage and his ability to radicalize others to his cause quickly to make them just like him presented a growing threat. So when Neo teams up with the machines at the end to defeat Agent Smith, it is an alliance to stop the growing threat of fascism, because capitalism will always lead to fascism, privileging some over others and pitting them against everyone else, but ultimately needing to divest itself of its tools lest it challenge their power and take over. So at the end of the day, while Neo beat Agent Smith, Neo died, but capitalism, the machines, still went on. So basically what I'm saying is, think of the victory at the end of the Matrix Revolutions as basically just getting Joe Biden elected.
For many more radical leftist movements, Joe Biden represented a return to neoliberal pre-Trump era politics, a man who many were forced to vote for as a form of harm reduction, seeing the alternative of Trump and his more totalitarian inclinations in stoking of fascistic rhetoric and movements as much more harmful. However, Biden represents for many the exact same policies and issues with neoliberal capitalistic government that existed in the United States before Trump that led to the rising tide of fascism that Trump represented in the first place. A call for a return to normalcy that in actuality just reset the clock back only a few years, restarting the cycle again rather than ending it, but now on a much faster timetable, as we're soon to probably see this year with the midterm elections. While the growing issue of rising fascist movements and the return possibly of Trump in 2024 still being very much on the table and very much a present issue, even though many people wish to ignore it, to go back to sleep, to say that it's not there, that we dealt with it, when we very much did not.
We stalled a rising tide of fascism right before they had their coup, but the main problem still exists. And Biden, I mean the machines, aren't really doing much to change the system. In fact, many ways are perpetuating it and causing it to happen all over again. The same cycle happening all over again.
And this constant political loop, this Ouroboros that eats its own tail, is reflected within the Matrix itself in numerous ways. First and foremost, The Matrix Resurrections itself is a kind of re-loop of the entire first trilogy, kind of retelling the same story of that first trilogy, doing the same thing again. But even within this new version of The Matrix, Neo is forced to redo the same day over and over and over again, as we see in the montage when he is forced to remake the Matrix games. Even further, we learn at the beginning of Resurrections that the scene that we play out from the original Matrix movies actually takes place inside what is called a modal, a small program meant to play out the same loops over and over and over again.
You're thinking this modal is a loop or treadmill.
Even further, when Neo leaves the Matrix, we see that the fight against the system is still ongoing, and the same beats are repeating themselves, just with a new team of people. The loops constantly refrain over and over and over again. The faces may change, like new versions of Morpheus and Agent Smith, but the dynamics are exactly the same. So too with capitalist systems with the same beats over and over and over again. The politicians, the faces may change, but the dynamics stay exactly the same. Not to mention that we also all ourselves feel like we are caught in loops, doing the same day over and over and over and over again, going to our same jobs over and over and over and over and over again, just as Neo is in Resurrections. Constant feedback loops are part of capitalist structures, both in a microcosm and a macrocosm, limiting what our lives and our outlook on the future can be to just being stuck in these same ideas over and over and over again, never creating anything new, just regurgitating the same thing. Something that we're going to be talking about in just a second.
And Resurrections recognizes this. The Matrix still exists in this world, but how can it? Given that most people had come to recognize how dangerous this system was when Agent Smith nearly destroyed the first one. How can we uphold a new Matrix, uphold that same system, if it was nearly destroyed by a coup at the end? Well, we're given the first hints of this in the film's dissection of nostalgia. In the world that feels so uncertain, nostalgia, looking towards a past that we know existed, makes us feel better. Resurrections is a film about nostalgia. How nostalgia, looking to the past, gives us a sense of certainty. And we see this in our popular culture. We see this in cinema itself. I mean, the week before Resurrections came out, Spider-Man No Way Home became one of the top grossing movies of all time. It was a film literally about bringing together different heroes and villains from across numerous different film franchises, and itself sat within a 30-film franchise, making us remember all the good times we had with all of those characters, reflecting on the past and our feelings about it. If you hadn't known Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man before that movie, would their inclusion in No Way Home hit as hard? Would Andrew Garfield saving MJ carry weight in that movie if we didn't remember his past saving Gwen Stacy? And No Way Home, by the way, is a singular example, but we currently live in a media landscape dominated by reboots, films that rely on intertextual understandings of other films, remakes, and continuations of numerous different franchises. Nostalgia permeates our media landscape. And it does so because many of us wish to escape into our past, into nostalgia, because the now feels so damn scary and uncertain. And our media feeds it to us because they want the money. Capitalism creates the uncertainty and then monetizes the only way that we have to be able to feel better about that uncertainty, by feeding us nostalgia for the past. Yet these appeals to the past of cinema also take on a darker aspect too. You see, nostalgia only reflects the past, but it's also a fleeting, calorie-less meal. But these current versions of these things often leave many people feeling dissatisfied, like they aren't as good as what we remembered about the past, that the thing that we're eating now isn't as good as what we had. Think about how there are elements of numerous fan bases of Star Wars or He-Man or Cowboy Bebop or Star Trek. They constantly argue that the current iterations of the franchise aren't as good as the past works. Now, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, it's different with every case, but what's most important is how that nostalgia has been used to stoke strong emotions, often anger, often feeling that people want to go back to the past.